1937, that magic year again, Bill Pauley made a trip to the United States, and while he was there, he went out to see a team of aerobats performing. And here they are, Luke Williamson, Billy McDonald, and in the center is Claire Chennault, colonel in the U.S. Army Air Corps. It was the Air Corps then, not the Army Air Forces yet. And they had an aerobatic team, a lot like the modern-day Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. And he was really impressed with them. And a lot of people in the Air Force were really impressed with Chennault. But he was nearing retirement. This was his retirement year. He was about to check out. And so Bill Pauley went to Claire Chennault and he said, you're a wonderful pilot, and everybody within the fighter aviation branch of the Army Air Corps is very impressed with you and your theories and what you do. Understand you're retiring. And Chennault said, yeah, I'm going to retire. I'm going to go back to Louisiana and I'm going to work on my farm. Bill Pauley said, well, wait, before you do that, I have a job opportunity for you. How would you like to come to China and help Madam Chiang put together an Air Force? And they dickered a little bit about the price, and Chennault said, well, how long would I have to go over there for? He said, it's a 3-month deal. You're just going to come for 3 months. So Chennault went for 3 months and ended up staying for 8 years. Here he is with Madam and the Generalissimo. You'll notice that the Generalissimo has got a big grin on his face. Madam and Chennault are, well, they're a little bit grim-faced there because of this. This is a map of China. So this is circa 1940. And this is all of eastern China that had been occupied by the Japanese. Shanghai, the big commercial capital, Hankow, Nanking, Beijing, then Piping was up there. And then all of the major ports. Here's Canton down there. All of those were in Japanese hands. Of course, Korea had been part of the Japanese Empire since 1910, Formosa since the turn of the century. Thanks to circumstances in Europe, Indochina was open to Japanese occupation. So China's in a pretty bad way, and that's why you see these people, Madam and Chennault, worried. The other thing that the world had to worry about, and this is September of 1940. This is the Japanese embassy in Berlin. September of 1940, there were 3 countries met to form an alliance. It was called the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis. The alliance was the tripartite alliance, and you had, remember I was talking about those malevolent ideologies on the march in the world? Well, on the far right, you've got Italy in the center, the host for this particular event, Japan, and then on the left, the old crooked cross of Germany. Well, there was one guy in the world that didn't really want to surrender the world to these malevolent ideologies. Franklin Roosevelt was trying to figure out ways that he could aid those countries that were fighting those malevolent ideologies. He did everything he could to get supplies to Britain so that they could fight the Nazis, and he really wanted to do the same thing for the Chinese against the Japanese. So long about early 1941, he came up with the idea of the Lend-Lease Act, which was functioned to initially to supply the United Kingdom with basically with free military supplies. The idea was that they would pay later, but they eventually paid, but it was not until the 1970s. But so he was doing that for Britain, and he was hoping to do the same thing for China. And then he got a call one day that somebody he knew that knew somebody said, I want you to meet this guy. So Roosevelt said, yeah, who is this guy? And the guy turned out to be Claire Chennault. And Chennault came to the White House, a man with a plan. And his plan that he had cooked up during his 3 months in China, which had now gone to 4 years, and he had the idea for an aerial foreign legion. He wanted to get experienced American pilots to go over there and fly in a special unit in China. He called it the American Volunteer Group because they would have to volunteer. And he pitched this idea to Roosevelt, and Roosevelt said, well, how are you going to get experienced combat pilots? Where in the world? Well, we're going to get them right here in the United States. How are you going to do that? Well, we're going to get them out of the services. We'll make it so that all of these experienced pilots, Army pilots, Navy pilots, Marine Corps pilots, can resign from the services without any penalty and sign a contract with one of these shell companies that TV Soong and Bill Pauley had put together. It's a long, elaborate chain of interlocking companies, as we're all familiar with in the history of such things. And we'll get them to resign. They'll resign without penalty. We'll just hire them under this new company. And this is a story that I'm sure a lot of you heard before, and you've probably heard the story about how Roosevelt signed an executive order to make that happen. Well, I thought, well, I've heard that story. I went to the Federal Register, and I went through 1940, and I went through 1941, and I was looking at executive orders, and guess what? There was never an executive order. There was a wink and a nod. But nearly 100 pilots resigned from the services and signed up. They signed contracts dated July 4, 1942. Here they are in action. Nakajima Ki-27s down there. This is flying in defense of that crescent that I showed you, the beginning in the north of Kunming, China, and all the way down to Rangoon. This is them in action. Here's a P-40 running from a Japanese Zero. I like to let that one hang a little bit because when I show this to groups of airplane buffs, they always are quick to point out it's not a Zero. No, it's not. It's actually not a Zero. It's a Nakajima Ki-43 that got misreported as a Zero. And one of the main reasons that you know that is that the Flying Tigers were not flying against the Japanese Navy, which operated Zeros, but against the Japanese Army that had bases all through Thailand and Indochina. So that's who they were fighting against. But the main thing that they were there to do was to destroy the Japanese bombers. This is a Ki-21, which the Japanese referred to as a heavy bomber. It's about the size of a Douglas B-18, a lot smaller than the heavy bombers that the Americans had but did not yet have in action in the Far East. So this is the point where I would like to talk a little bit about some of the statistics. I already showed you how the Flying Tigers were outlaws because they were operating outside of neutrality laws through Roosevelt's wink and a nod. They were also bounty hunters, and the Chinese government had agreed to pay these guys. Well, they got paid a salary, but they had agreed to pay the pilots $750 for every Japanese plane that got shot down. That's $750 right there. And the way that $750 was measured in 1941 money was that it was equal to the price of the new car. Let's introduce you to a few of the pilots. Tex Hill, respectable 11.25 aerial victories. The fraction is those are applied when a group of pilots collaborate on shooting down an airplane. So if you and I go out and the two of us together shoot down one of those heavy bombers, then we each get a 0.5, and then it stacks up from there. As you can tell by his nickname, you can tell where he was born. He was born in Japanese-occupied Korea. He later grew up in Texas. Scarsdale Jack, he actually did grow up in New York, 10 aerial victories. And here's the man, poor old Greg Boyington. He was credited with 3.5 aerial victories flying with the AVG. He claimed 6. If you've read his autobiography, Baa Black Sheep, he goes into great detail how he was screwed over by Chennault and the AVG establishment. Not a very pretty story, nor was his eventual exit from the Flying Tigers. He was one of the ones who just flat out resigned. He got drunk one night, and the next day he just went down to the airport in Kunming and hitchhiked home. And of course, his real heroism was flying in the South Pacific with the Marines again. He went back to the States and was parking cars in a Seattle parking garage for a while until he finally was able to get back into the Marines. And then, of course, he scored 22 in the South Pacific, was shot down, prisoner of war, Medal of Honor, and one of the great Marines. Another 3 guys, Chuck Sawyer, Bob Neal. Bob Neal was the highest scoring ace, and Jim Howard. Jim Howard was born in China, another son of missionaries.